Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the BroxtenDigital Show. My name is Broxton Davis. I'm the host of this podcast, as well as a performance media analyst at one of the top advertising agencies in the world. And today I'm bringing you another episode of my podcast where I interview some of the best doing it in marketing and advertising, directors, VPs, C-suites, you name it. We're bringing them on the show and getting all the industry secrets for students and young professionals to just go out and dominate in the start of their career. We've kind of been on a streak here of having a lot of awesome guests and just so many insights. I myself have been learning a lot, so that's how I know kind of the show is working and doing its thing. But today we have another amazing guest. She has helped me a ton. Somebody who's kind of been a mentor for me since college. We have that Michigan State connection. But anyways, she's also done a lot in advertising. She's kind of created a career for herself out of, not the most typical route. So I'm super excited to dive into that. But ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Eman Hubbard.
Thanks, Broxton. Thank you so much for having me today, this evening.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you're super busy, so thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. Yeah, if you want to just kick off by just kind of going over, what you're doing now and everything, kind of give the audience an idea of, what does Eman do on the day-to-day?
Yeah, so as you guys know, my name is Eman Hubbard. I'm an advertising director out here. And just to kind of give like a brief, I would say, elevator pitch of who I am is I started at a small agency called Güd Marketing out in Old Town Lansing, where I was like a digital specialist and really grew there, had a great time made a lot of mentors and connections. And eventually, even though I am a Spartan, I did transition to U of M's internal agency, Michigan Creative, and did a lot of campaigns regarding students and just enrollment and certain programs that were available. This was during the pandemic, and when 2020 really hit and everybody came home, I decided to really pivot and create my own consulting firm. And I stayed there for quite a bit of time doing consulting for a variety of different verticals. Think of like travel, hospitality, food, bev, you name it. Really trying to just grow transparently across all forms of media, whether it's, linear, strategy, paid search, programmatic, all the things. Just wanted to kind of dive deep and really grow in a lot of things. Eventually, I did transfer over to Goodway Group as a programmatic manager, and then found my way at Publicis here as a director, and it's been really great and really fun. I definitely learned a lot with all these transitions, and really, I would say through my time consulting, really got to appreciate all the different departments and how we come together, create holistic campaigns.
That's awesome, Iman. I mean, just that alone, just goes to show how much different experience you've had and, different situations you've been able to kind of, understand what's going on and then figure out how you're going to fix it with, your skill set of marketing. And I can tell, as your careers went on, you've clearly developed a lot of different skills and kind of created a holistic understanding of how marketing works and everything, which really to me is one of the main ways you grow in this industry. What were some of the ways early in your career that you think really, made the difference, and maybe at the time didn't seem like it, but it was a huge learning moment and, led to that holistic, mindset that you have now?
I think the biggest thing was when I first started agency, I was, in the office working with a group of like 30. And when you're at a small firm, one of the huge benefits is that you get to wear many hats. And so I was able to sit next to SVPs, even our principal, trying to figure out things for campaigns. And I was able to learn really closely with folks. So even though I started as a digital specialist, primarily in paid search and programmatic, I was able to learn from our social team, our creative folks, as we did creative in-house, and was able to see how those things connected and interacted with each other. So I think that was the key thing to get me to where I am today. Was I started out being able to have the ability to see things from a high level because I was in a space where they allowed that and often encouraged that. So it made me a lot more self-sufficient, but then also I was able to fail safely because I had leaders in the space that were here guiding me. Like one of my favorite people, Carol Tuckey, she's still out in the Michigan area doing amazing campaigns. She was a great mentor for me and really transparently shaped who I am today as an advertiser.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has those mentors in their career that just like kind of appeared out of nowhere, but then end up being somebody, just as important as like one of your parents. It's kind of crazy. I've had a couple people that, just meeting them at Michigan State or meeting them early in my career have kind of, turned into that person. And when you initially meet them, you definitely don't think that's going to happen. For me, at least, especially at the younger age. Right. Yeah. And you're super, intimidated, scared to kind of meet that person. And then next thing you're hopping on like a personal call with them and, chopping it up about life rather than even asking for career advice. So it's super cool to, yeah, it's super cool to kind of see how those relationships can get built and foster, especially even just early in your career when maybe you think that, you know, you're kind of in this alone. You get in, and it's a huge world out there. You go from high school or college where you've had your year by year progress, and everybody in your class, and things change a lot when you get into the real industry. I know you
Right.
didn't have the most traditional upbringing. I don't know, maybe in high school you probably weren't like I want to be a advertising director. And I'm sure, there's a lot of college students and even young professionals in the industry right now who are feeling, kind of the same thing. Like, I don't really know where I want to go. I maybe haven't had the best of luck yet. One, I would love for you to kind of just share, kind of how you manage your untraditional route into advertising. And then two, maybe just some advice towards anybody who is kind of feeling that confused, not kind of sure how to make sense of what I'm doing right now situation.
I think the biggest thing that I like to say, or the phrase that kind of get me through, is like, do it anyway, explore. Like it's okay to suck at something. So with me, um obviously you and I have talked before. I went to Michigan State studying game design in Japanese. And during that time I was just building video games. I had not even the remote thought of going into advertising. My perception of advertising was like, what is it called? Vector knives. People used to go door to door and sell knives in my town. And I was like, I do not want to do this, despite what Career Quest may say. So I actively rebelled against what the recommendation was. And when I, was going through college, I played college ball, and a lot of us were like communications majors or something loosely like that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was scared at that last semester until I took a digital business course, and that got me into paid search. And like the nosy person in me just like fell into it, even though I didn't graduate with an advertising degree. I couldn't pivot, at that last minute. So what I did, even though I was scared, I did it anyway. And I led with my passion, and I was very much a self-starter. Was able to get a small internship in Ann Arbor that was unpaid, to really get the ropes and be around the people that have more seasoned experience. And I think that really helped me flourish. And so I would say that if you don't know what you want to do, like, that's totally fine. But explore, and even though it might be scary, do it anyway.
No, I love that approach, and I think that's something all young people should definitely hold close. Is like, just do it anyway. You're at a point in your life where like you're kind of supposed to figure things out. Everything doesn't just kind of
Yes.
magically happen.
Yes. And like I say, with the mentors that I had, a lot of them, it was just because I was in the space and they saw how eager I was to learn. And that made them feel like, okay, maybe I'll place a big bet with her, and I'm forever grateful for those folks. But you don't know if you don't try, so yeah.
No, that makes a ton of sense, and definitely, I mean, that's kind of a common theme that I've heard interviewing a lot of these professionals on the show so far is like you need to be the person bringing those ideas to the table, and if you're not, people
Mhm.
just aren't even willing in the first place to kind of make that bet, like you said. What were some of the
Yeah.
ways early in your career, when you didn't have that say in the office or weren't, holding a position where you could tell people what's what, that you brought those new ideas and got yourself noticed in the office?
Can you say that again? It was kind of weird.
No, you're good. Just like early in your career, what were some of the ways that, I mean, now you have the title and everything to where you can bring an idea to the table. People are willing to, hear it, want to go about it just because of what you've been able to do. But earlier in your career, you don't have that. You might bring an idea to the table and your manager looks at you crazy. What were some of the ways or even, strategies you'd recommend for somebody who does, want to bring ideas to the table, want to be somebody who people want to take a bet on, but maybe just is a bit confused on, how do I do it? How do I even, bring this to the table to my manager?
To be honest, I've been really blessed to have exceptional leadership when I started. However, I understand that that's not the experience of many. What I would do is that if I was in that position, or what I did before I realized that the leadership I had was one that fostered growth, is to, again, take that leap of faith. You should be having one-on-ones with your leadership. And I think that's an important time to bring up those conversations, because you probably do have a great idea, but need to identify the perfect moment to bring it up and who's in the room. Something that I had to learn is understanding like when to speak and when not to speak. So I would say that if you do have a great idea or something that you want to push forward, lean on your manager first. So then they should be able to help you navigate that space in a more eloquent way, especially when you're in some of these more leadership conversations or leadership spaces.
No, I definitely think there's something to be said there about knowing when to talk and when not to talk also, because I know at least for me, I'm always trying to bring something to the table. I always want to be somebody who's innovating, onto the newest thing. But, sometimes when you're always forcing those ideas and new things down people's throats, to, so to speak, and just maybe
Yeah,
being almost like a bit obnoxious with it, it can actually hurt you. But
you
also
can't.
then there's the whole other side of it too, of like you do have to overcome the fear of getting told, this idea might be stupid, and bringing that idea to your manager. And I think you have some great advice there on just like, pick your moments. If it's going to be a one-on-one where the worst thing that's going to happen is your manager is going to say, nah, just scrap this, I mean, go for it. It's a lot better than pitching it to your entire team in like a status call or something. And next
Right.
thing you know, you're the main thing everybody's talking about at lunch. So definitely a great
Exactly.
point.
At the end of the day, like, your leadership should be your biggest champion. They should always have in their mindset of like, how can I set them up for success? That is the role that they have. Um, Another thing is sometimes, like, even if the idea gets shot down, there's more there's more wins there. Like, the fact that you even spoke up and had the courage to speak up is huge. How you handle that rejection is huge. These soft skills that people, I feel like, do not focus on as much as they should is something that I really encourage, like a perspective shift. For instance, I do not advocate for every idea that my teams have had, but what I really appreciate is that you're ideating, because we're in a space where we are thriving on like green lighting, yellow lighting, red lighting ideas. And the fact that you are constantly thinking of it, what ways can we, which is something that I really preach with my teams, that is what we need more of. In what ways can we? And not fearing rejection, because you're going to get that in the space, and how you react, or I would say respond to it, really showcases your character and your soft skills.
Yeah, no, that is such a great point and definitely a great way to kind of close out on how to deal with that manager relationship and be somebody that's bringing those ideas to the table. Now, one thing you just mentioned earlier too is that it's pretty common to not get brought up in that great management situation where you might not love the team you're working with, or maybe just have somebody who's constantly micromanaging you. Now, one thing I know you're also really good at, Iman, is building relationships and networking and putting yourself out there. What can maybe some steps or tips be that you recommend for people who might be in that situation who are like, I need to expand my network, I need to meet some new people to create some new opportunities? How do you kind of go about that without burning bridges and stepping on toes?
Oh my goodness. That is a really good one, because my career path hasn't been all sugar and rainbows. Um, there's some spaces where, you have to assess the environment. And like, let's say you're on a client, a specific client where like the team is not as encouraging as you would want it to be. There's always ways that you could learn from that. Understand like want to be and what you don't want to be. There's been times where I've had leadership where I'm like, oh, I don't want to adapt this quality when I was a junior member, and I retained that and ensured that when I did become in part of leadership, this is not a quality that I want to carry on. But when you want to expand your network, something that I really, really preach, as you know, I have been in person, hybrid, and remote. I do believe in connection, whether that's virtual or otherwise. But when people are starting out in their career, I strongly recommend going out there, just like going and having a coffee date with a person, or join some of these advertising events. If you are at a university, chances are you have somebody that's within the field. I like to use Spartans because I bleed green like through and through. I always tell students to leverage your network and help navigate that there. There's a ton of folks that come in for like guest speakings and things like that that you can be connecting with and that would love to uplift you. So I would say like get exposure by figuring out what's in your community and understand that your community is more than a zip code.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And I mean, also, I think people, especially my age, need to understand that like your community wants to help you. You said like there's just tons of people that want to help and want to provide this knowledge, but I think it's a common misconception that a lot of people, even myself, I've been there before. Even like when I initially met you and reached out on LinkedIn to get a coffee
Yeah.
chat, I was so nervous
Yeah.
and like totally expecting to get ignored. So I get those feelings, and it's so refreshing to just hear all these professionals come on and say, no, like, please reach out. We want to help you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Speak your truth even though your voice shakes. Like, I think nerves are good. Nerves nerves help signal whether you really want something or not, whether you really care about something or not. And again, it's a skill that I think often people forget needs sharpening. Being okay with reaching out and getting rejection. One of my very first internships, this was before I had switched to game design. Um, I was I was at a Costco. It was a job. It was like a non-paid sales thing. Um, where I had to sit and be like one of those people next to the what are they called? The food testers or whatnot, samplers. And I had to sell pierogies. You know how many times I got denied because nobody wanted to buy my pierogies? So much. It was insane. It was the amount of pierogies that were in my freezer were like unhinged. But the one thing that I got out of that job was accepting rejection and knowing how to pivot and seek realignment. And just one of my old bosses said this too, be like a duck and let the water roll off your back. That's a skill people have to learn because that is part of our industry, part of life, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. It's just reality that you're going to deal with rejection pretty much throughout all of your life, whether you're doing the most amazing things or the worst person in the world. Somebody's going to eventually not want to hear what you have to say or tell you, no, you're wrong. So it just happens. And I think having an early moment where you are able to kind of forge that skill and get told no a bunch of times is kind of a cheat code. I got lucky and also kind of had a BS sales internship early in my college career that
Everybody got one.
yeah, they know to hit the marketing kids because they're trying to figure things out, I think. But like
Yeah.
you do that and get told no a bunch of times, and I totally had to get that mindset that you were talking about of just like, how can I learn from this? What were my actual takeaways? Like there's no better situation I could be in. I couldn't get an internship other than this, so like we might as well make the
Right.
most out of it. But
Right.
if you're not that person, I would definitely recommend like do some kind of practice to get used to getting told no, because how Iman was just saying, how you respond to rejection, especially when you're in a high stakes call, like maybe with somebody very important, they're going to be analyzing how you handle that no, then and who knows what kind of opportunity that could even create from itself. So I think that's just a great point.
Don't even know, like sometimes that no that they give you is not really a no, it's a not yet. And being able to understand the climate and understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, no, I mean that's typically what it is. I feel like it's usually like, especially people who are having those meetings and meeting with people who are somebody that could propel them in their career. Usually they're really hungry to do so, but it's just like not yet. You're not quite there yet. There's no reason to rush it or push the narrative. So I think that's some great advice and just something to hold with you as you might have those feelings creeping in of like, why is my
Yeah.
opportunity not coming? Why has somebody not pulled me up to the big leagues yet, so to speak? It's
Right.
coming. I mean, I think, I don't know,
It
Iman,
is.
tell me if I'm wrong here, but it's a lot more just about like the daily inputs and having that belief that, hey, this is going to result in the bigger goal that I'm working towards.
Exactly. It's those micro moments, those smaller milestones that really matter. And I think a lot of people think of, I don't want to say a lot of people, but oftentimes we kind of curate this roadmap in our career of big milestones. And I would just challenge folks to take those milestones and then chop them up into smaller micro moments. It makes it a lot more enjoyable of the journey, and you learn and grow a lot more. So yeah, it's not a no, it's just a not yet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I definitely need to get a little better at celebrating those micro moments myself. To kind of switch gears a little bit, though, Iman, I wanted to also go over. I think you are somebody who has really done a great job at finding your niche in marketing. You found something you're good at, and you've really leaned in on it and created a career around it for yourself. Even though
Hmm.
earlier in your career you had a ton of experience doing other stuff, you got to probably help,
Yeah.
some clients manage their entire digital presence, which there's a ton of things to be doing there. But really now you're growing in your career, leaning into your niche. So I just wanted to, talk about that and just kind of how do you discover your niche and, how do you kind of know when it's like, this is what I should be leaning in on?
Oh, I find whatever sparks joy. When I first started, uh, my boss was a media planner, and I was a digital specialist, but I did help with the planning as well. And what I did to understand what I liked was I tried everything. That was one of the main reasons why I started doing consulting, was because some of these avenues, like paid search, you can teach yourself, analytics, like Google Analytics, you can teach yourself. There's a lot of information out of there. For a long time, I thought when I was a digital specialist, I was going to be a data science girly because of my coding experience and just a lot of the people I was around, computer science. I thought that was more my vibe. And I just really tested out everything that I was showing interest in to figure out like if this was really a good fit for me. Programmatic was something that really caught me by surprise because that was the only space that I hadn't really fully tapped into. But once I did, I was able to really analyze it. And before I got to Publicis, I made that decision of like, you have at least a year and a half of experience in each of these buckets. Which one really got you like actually awake at night thinking? And that's when I realized like programmatic is for me. It's very big bets, high stakes, high reward type of energy that matches my energy. And that's why I ended up going in that space. But the experience that I had in the other departments really helped me understand like, okay, this is where like when we're doing media planning and stuff, or when I'm working with strategy, I can better understand where they're coming from because I came from that space. And when they're looking for like, how do we create a holistic campaign? I'm known as a shark, but in terms of like, I always want all of the budgets, all these things, but I also know what makes sense. And the experience I've had from all the other departments helps me really like build trust with my teams because I'm not like just focused on me, or like my programmatic department.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense, and I really like how you brought up earlier, just like how you can do that with your team and not have all the focus be on yourself, and also not have all the focus be on what you're working on. Being able to kind of admit like, hey, this is what makes sense, and I know this from the standpoint of like I'm a specialist here, but I know what I'm talking about elsewhere. Is just I'm kind of coming to see that that's kind of some game changing skills to have when you're talking with different teams and building out these campaigns, especially when you're at a large agency, which is where a lot of young people kind of end up to start their career. So I just think that's some great advice, and something that kind of takes some figuring out, especially like early on. You're thinking like, how can I vouch for myself? How can I make it the best possible for me? When really the strategy that's going to create the best business outcomes is what gets you moved ahead. Is what I'm trying to kind of starting to see. And
Yeah.
then another
It's
thing
a
that you
it's the mindset of me going to we. Like cut, and I think it's because I played, college ball, that I'm very coach oriented. Even though I ended up picking that programmatic space because I have experience in the other ones. I'm able to appreciate their effectiveness within campaigns. All right, go ahead.
No. That totally makes sense, and I think is a great point that needed to be said. But I was also going to say, as far as like you talking about when you found your niche and found your passion, two things you didn't mention was I knew this was where I could make the most money, and you also didn't say there was the best connections here with people who wanted to move me up, like it would have been the fastest way to the top. You actually sat there and thought and did like some self-analysis of, hey, like who am I? What do I like? What aligns
Yeah,
with, my day-to-day and my vibe? And I think
yeah,
finding that is, truly one of the secrets to finding something that you can, propel yourself to the top within.
100%. Because like, if you're focused on climbing the ladder, you're I feel like you burn out very quickly. At least that was what I experienced in it as I matured in the space. I always tell people, like, at some point, when is enough money enough? Truly. And I get it. When you start out in your career, it's very scary and you are focused on money. I mean, I grew up in not the most best financial positions. And that was definitely a big thing that I wanted to make sure that I was secure to be self sufficient and be able to have a home. Um, but I think as you go into your career, you should explore other opportunities, or not other opportunities, but like more than just money. What other value can be brought in the space and be brought for you?
No, and I mean the proof is in the pudding too. Your first internship that got you into this whole marketing and advertising thing, you literally said was unpaid. So it's like,
Right.
and for somebody coming from that background that is hungry, to be self-sufficient and probably create, some financial situations that their family might not have had to,
Hmm.
take the bet on yourself and go do that unpaid internship. I mean, that says a
Yeah.
lot about, what you're saying there.
Yeah. You got to invest in yourself.
Definitely. So another thing, Iman, that I really wanted to talk with you about on this episode was culture. I think you are somebody who really leans into culture. You really lean into the Michigan State culture, which is kind of how we got to know each other. And just, I
Yeah.
respect that so much about you. You do so much for Michigan State students. That's so awesome. And, one of the reasons I really
Yeah.
started this show was like, I was a Michigan State student and wish this was something that existed. So,
Yeah.
I guess
I
to just
love
kind
how
of
you give back.
Yes, I try, and I model a lot of it off of, what you taught me by example. But as far as culture goes, sometimes you find yourself in a situation where the culture is not great. You're not doing a lot of stuff. The team might not be bonding. The vibes might just be off. How have you, throughout your career, been able to just kind of be somebody who fosters an awesome culture with whoever you work with?
I always try to make sure, and you could even attest this with some of the like vendor conversations, is like, you cannot control other people's emotions or how they present themselves, but that doesn't mean you need to adopt what they are bringing. I always like to be the light. I always like to make sure that whenever somebody communicates with me, they're left feeling fulfilled, they're left feeling enriched and just like a little bit brighter. My energy, especially in person, is very whimsical. And that's just my personality. And if other people don't like that, that's fine. The sweetest peach in the bunch, and some people just may not like peaches. So I think that even though at some point, when you're in leadership, you can definitely have more control over culture. But when you cannot have control over culture because you may be junior, you still have control over yourself and how you show up. And I promise you, other people are going to take notice of that. I would attest that a lot of the mentorship and opportunities I got were because I showed up authentically me in all its quirkiness. And a lot of people gravitated towards that. So sometimes you can't control culture, but you could always control yourself.
I love that, and it's just so true. I mean, you got to control the controllables and really just not let
Hmm.
the uncontrollables phase you.
Yeah.
That's Yeah, it's such a great point. Now, as far as, creating that culture and being your authentic self, that's something, you were able to do. And I think early in your career probably wasn't a problem for you. But there's definitely something to be said about kind of that mask you might put on when you go in the office, or even the people you're interacting with, are not just
Hmm.
not being their authentic selves. I
Yeah.
guess, have you kind of like, leaned on your outside network when you find yourself in situations like that? And like, I know you mentioned, going to these events and things. What are some ways to maybe get out of that if it's a toxic culture, or just not a culture where you're growing, to insert yourself into some of those cultures where you're getting out of it what you want?
I mean, I would say like when you're in a situation that it can be toxic like that, sometimes there's redirection, and it's okay to be able to say like, hey, this wasn't a good fit for me. That doesn't mean you're a failure. That just means you had to pivot. And there is a win in that too, because you're still learning what you can and cannot tolerate. As you know, if you look at my resume, the beginning, I was staying at places for like a year and a half, 16 months, things like that. Publicis is really an amazing place to be that I've stayed here for. I think I hit my 4-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. Um, and I don't see those spaces as being those previous spaces as being like a regret. One of my very, very good friends, fellow simmer gamer girl, we bonded because we came from a really good culture and then got moved to a team that was like not the best culture. But I found a friend in that. So I would say that you can still recognize, like, hey, this is not for me and I need to pivot, but still get something good out of it. If anything, it's what you do not want to repeat for yourself. And when you do look for other places that you want to go to, make sure to ask these critical questions that help influence what the culture is, to make sure that, you don't continue the path that you're going in with like a work environment that doesn't serve you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, is great advice to anybody kind of in that, even if it's not toxic, even if it's just like a culture where you can't grow and you can't, bring your
Yeah.
authentic self to the table. I think, that's something you got to
Yeah.
recognize. And the earlier you recognize it, probably the better for yourself.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of our spiel on culture. I know, that's something that I just think you have done a great job at cultivating. So I really want to talk about that with you and just kind of get your MO on, what is the
Yeah.
secret behind having that good culture around you all the time. Um, but now
I
I kind
think
of want to,
when I became a director, I um I wanted it to be I wanted to make sure I was amplifying all of the beautiful things that I saw from my previous leaderships, and then also make sure that I was not repeating the same harmful um engagements that some of the others did.
yeah, I mean, sometimes your current situation is just giving you a great book of, what not to do when you're the person in those shoes.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. But anyways, I do want to kind of switch gears now. I know we could
Mhm.
probably sit here and talk about culture all day, to be honest.
I
It's
know.
such an important thing. I guess one last thing on it is just that I do think it's kind of up to my generation to start bringing the culture back in. I think COVID kind of mucked a lot of things up, and just, these stories that I hear pre-COVID of all the crazy cool stuff you guys were doing in the advertising industry is just not
Yeah.
happening nowadays. So we gotta figure out how to bring that stuff back, in my
You could
opinion.
always come to my programmatic department. Is so fun. But yes, yes, I do think this current generation is going to be really bringing what was lost during those 5 years.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's just something I've tried to cultivate as much as I can. But anyways, to kind of switch gears a little bit and get into, what you're doing now and kind of how you're navigating, this director role where you have a lot of responsibility, you're balancing important budgets. It's not a game anymore. You're not just trying to look good for your boss or, move up the ladder. It gets pretty serious once you get to a position right there. So I guess just to kind of get started, later in your career now, what are some of the skills that you've developed in this role that you wish you would have developed maybe in an earlier role?
Budgets, understanding money. I never grew up with any concept of money. And when I came into my role as an AD, that was one of my biggest pain points. I faced it head on and just communicated it to my leadership that I really struggled with it. And therefore, I would love an opportunity to sharpen my skills and shadow them through that process. So I really wish that was something I did before, because again, not everybody has great leadership. But luckily, I had really good leadership that was willing to let me fail safely and harness that skill.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, for you, were you somebody who like you were like, I got this important role, I kind of need to do a self audit, or was this maybe something that you knew you weren't the sharpest in and just, didn't
I
really
knew
want
I
to?
was. I knew I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. And um, before somebody else told me I wasn't good at it, I wanted to be transparent and authentic to my boss and say, this is where I lack that you may not see yet because of the opportunities. So, in what ways can we help sharpen that without risking the account?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the best way to handle it. Just like be transparent, be straight up, and most of the time people do want to help you. Now, would you say like to anybody who is sitting here, maybe my age or even, in the middle between you and I, and knows they have that one thing that they hate doing, but they know they're gonna need soon, would you recommend just, being being real about it and just kind of getting it out of the way and figuring it out?
100%. Again, your I cannot stress this enough. And again, maybe this is kind of like peering into like the culture that I have on my team. I am supposed to be your biggest champion. I'm supposed to praise you in public and critique in private. And so, at least that's how I kind of run things. So I think it's really good to be able to have somebody at a higher role be able to be that space where you can be transparent on the areas that you need to grow in, because we only see what you allow us to see, like my boss wouldn't have known that I struggled with money if unless I was put in that position, which I hadn't had to before. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. Um, but to kind of keep on the same idea here with what you're doing right now and kind of this importance of your current role, I guess you're also in a lot of conversations and meetings, even just on your day to day, that would definitely phase me and have me thinking like, oh my god, I need to probably spend hours of prep for this meeting. Not that's kind of just like your day to day now. So what are some ways that you've went from being, I'm sure it's the same, that person who would have been nervous and stressed and oh my god, there's so many important people I'm talking to now you're going about your day to day and seem to kind of be doing fine. What are some of the ways you've handled that?
I think that how have I handled that? That's a really good question. Um,
I mean, I just know it's something I stress about, of just like it's going to be a clear change of what I'm expected of now to when I do get to my goal of moving up. There's going to be a whole new set of expectations.
yeah, yeah. I would say, geez, with me, I've just learned to fail safely. Like honestly, I've been very transparent with every step that I've been in and every room I've been in, because sometimes you're able to prep, but sometimes you're not. And like I think there's beauty in humility and being able to understand like, okay, I this is a space I need to work on.
No, I think you couldn't have said it better. I mean, there is so much beauty in humility, and most people are kind of just, I think, like scared to go to that realm and really sit there and think about it and talk about it. But
You don't have to be the expert in everything. I always make that known, is like I am not the smartest person in the room, nor do I have to be. If you are the smartest person in the room, you need to go find another room.
that is also a great point. Yes, and I know I wanted to say too, for like the person who might be sitting here thinking, well, you know what, I just can't be like Iman. I can't just not care. I stress about things. That is definitely an indicator that maybe you do need to spend some time. Just realizing that what people like Iman are saying is so true, and that you need to fail. You need to get out there and grow. And it's still something I struggle with. And the more I do it, the more I realize the value in it, and that people like Iman and all these other guests I'm having are not coming on here and saying this just because they can, because they're in a big position. It's what they want to
Mm-hmm.
see. Like they want people our
Yeah.
age to be doing that stuff. And, those are the people getting hired at the end of the day, which, if you're watching
Yeah.
my show, I'm guessing that's your goal. So
Yeah. I think my favorite like thing about somebody is somebody who has humility and they're able to say like, "Hey, I don't know this," or "I don't know, I'm struggling here." Like that that is such a value that I appreciate.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I wouldn't say that you're the only person that appreciates that. I'm sure like anybody who's managing people, the main thing they probably deal with is people acting like they know everything, acting like they're good at, maybe something they're not good at. But then, you as the manager are the person fixing the problem. So I totally understand why you would want people to have that humility and want to bring those flaws to the table because, you're kind of the perfect person, or your manager is kind of the perfect person to help you fix them. Just like how you went about with the finance thing, you seeked out the help, and seems like now that's not really an issue anymore.
Yeah, because sometimes like at the end of the day, um, chances are the person that you're working with, they were part of the hiring process with you. And especially when you're somebody new, like I have been a part of hiring panels. We know you don't know everything. There's no way you could. But what we're looking for is some either like rudimentary technical skills if you had a year in, but heavy on the soft skills because technical you can build, you know? So just being upfront about it is the best thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm so happy you just brought up soft skills and hard skills because that is the perfect segue into this next segment. This is the rapid fire value segment where I'm just going to ask you some questions off rip. And we just want to hear your one or two sentences of here's my super actionable, super real advice and insights. And, this is things that students and young professionals are going to be able to go and implement either, tomorrow, this week, and start seeing a difference in whatever they might be struggling with. So to kind of get started, for you, Iman, what right now is the best free or low cost tools, even a couple of them, that are really moving the needle for you?
Oh my gosh, I always tell folks to take on, I think it's like Meta Blueprint, Google Analytics, or like the Google Marketing School. So you could learn Google Analytics, DV360, all of those things free or low or no cost. Canva is a really big one, especially when I was doing consulting and like small businesses didn't have the time to allocate to like creative. That gives you some leeway. And then also for like my performance paid search folks or SEO folks, SEM Rush, that was something that I leveraged a lot when I first started to really understand the climate for any type of client that I was pitching. Even interviews. Like I would use that when I worked at the ACLU for their digital specialist role. I completely crawled their website. And when I came into the interview, I was like, this is how you're ranking, this and this is the things that are broken, and just read them the rights essentially. And that was something that my boss at the time really really appreciated, and she was like, okay, she's like, we should bring her on. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy nowadays. There's these tools that literally can pretty much give you the inside MO on, what the C suites are probably talking about of a business you might be
Right.
interviewing for. So that is some great
Mm-hmm.
advice. And one thing I would say too on the Meta Blueprint thing, you gave me that advice in college. And if you're somebody who ever thinks you'll be working in performance media, do that because you will hop into Meta in your first role and have zero idea what you're doing. And that certification, like that was one of the main differences of, me being able to kind of figure things out and get some momentum early in my career, or, having that learning curve when you just got out of college and don't want to learn anymore. It's not the greatest. So I would take advantage of those, free resources like she's talking about. um, Now this is another fun one. There's kind of the, MO of just like my generation and just younger people in general. We don't want to work hard. We want to be remote. So what would you say for the overachievers? What's the number one way that, people my age can be standing out against all the other junior talent?
Show up in person. I will say like that. As a remote worker, you would never think that I'm remote because I'm always in Birmingham, always in Detroit, always in Chicago, Miami. I plan on going to New York. When you're first starting out, the best way to get connection is the good old one-on-one way. So I know like remote work is something that people really want right now, but I would honestly save that for when you're more established in your role, because it's easy to fall into the background when you're a remote worker. It's harder to make uh, a lot of connections that way, unless you have this like big extroverted energy kind of thing. It can be very challenging, but having those in-person conversations allows you to have one-on-one conversations, coffee dates, a little bit more assistance um, than otherwise. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's almost like it's too easy. Like, thanks to COVID and everything, it's like literally all we have to do is kind of show up and be that person bringing the energy in person. And that sets you apart right there. And for the person who might be, feeling like they're trapped in a full remote role, I know like I started out my career full remote and had those feelings of like, I just kind of like holding myself back. I can't network. I can't get to these events. You can be like Iman. I literally like I'm happy you said, people don't think I'm remote because up until not long ago, I literally did not think you were a full remote employee. And, just based on how much I interacted with you and see you doing these things in person. So you can go
Yeah.
above and beyond and be that person who is full remote and still make it their presence
Right.
known. So relatable
I
to
have
everybody there.
I have a staff member that lives in Miami, and yes, I mean I love Miami. I have some family there, but I make it a priority to whenever I'm going out there, I go and do like a WeWork session with him, or we'll go out to dinner. So really trying to foster that connection. We can talk about work or we can talk about sports, but the main thing is we are having those conversations live.
Yeah, 100%. And I hope, anybody listening definitely leans in on that because it, like I said, is just almost too easy to not take advantage of. Now, I know you just mentioned soft skills and hard skills not long ago, and we talked about some important ones, but I guess to kind of narrow it down a little bit, what would you say, Iman, is the number one soft skill that people my age should be mastering if they want people like you to hire them?
Number one, I have to say my favorite is humility, because I can't do anything with a private person. You can't teach them if they feel like they already know everything. And I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword of having all of this information at our disposal. As people take that information, they think, okay, I got it, I know it all. And that's not true. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of context, there's just a lot of historical information that you're not going to get. So I would say that having that humility will make sure that even if you fall on your face or get egg on your face, somebody's there to wipe it off, because they're like, hey, you know what? That happens to everyone. But if you come in with a prideful heart, people aren't going to do that for you.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point earlier in the episode when you said, if you are that person who thinks, you are just in a group of, I am the smartest one here, I'm always the one doing the most and making things happen, it's probably time to move on to that next group. So there's always
Yep.
opportunity to practice that humility.
Yep. I mean, even right now, like with like my bodybuilding career, like I'm tapping my toes into a different category where I'm going to have to do handstands and like backflips and everything. And I haven't done one of those in years. But I'm like, hey, this is something I am weak at. Let me learn. I'm hungry to learn. And even with that, my new coach is like, it's free. I will teach you these skills free, because you are saying that, hey, I don't know them. I might suck at it to begin with, but I have that desire to work hard to get to a point where I can be good at it.
Yeah, it's a great point and just goes to show, practicing that humility never really puts you in a bad spot. It's only going to ever, like, even if you are somebody who knows a lot, practicing the humility is just going to put you in a better spot in other people's mind. Now, to kind of do the flip of that, what do you think is the number one hard skill? Something that we can actually practice and teach ourselves. What's the number one hard skill people like me should be learning and mastering right now?
I would say if you are going into advertising, I would pick one field to actually learn. Like, I think the lowest barrier of entry is like, again, like meta. The understanding of like, okay, I am like meta certified is a huge tech skill, but it also highlights a soft skill too. Because the tech skill is like, okay, you know the platform, you can go in and you can execute on day one, pending a few QAs, because you never should be launching campaigns with at least 3 levels of QA. But then it also tells me, as somebody who's starting out, is you're a self-starter. You're not waiting for somebody to tell you exactly what you need to do, because in the advertising space, very little does that happen where people are telling you exactly what you have to do.
Yeah, and I mean that is so true. You're not always gonna, get the perfect blueprint of how you should go about something. So one, knowing how to do it, and then two, showing that you'll figure out how to do it if you don't know how to do it, are just two super important things. And I'm super glad you brought those up. Now, this is the last one I got for you, Mon, at least for the rapid fire value segment. This is something that has been super important to me. I've built, the majority of my network on LinkedIn. I have, really leaned into posting there on the last couple years, and it has done a lot for me. Like, it has been a game changer, and I'm, so happy I finally just, kind of gulped down the fear and started putting myself
Yeah.
out there.
Did it
What would
anyway.
Yeah, heck yeah. And so what would you say to maybe the student who's a little bit scared, or maybe the person who's had a couple posts do good, but, don't have a routine? What should the LinkedIn strategy for people my age be, to fully utilize and, leverage that platform?
Honestly, one of the ways, and I do love LinkedIn. They're a little slower on some of their updates, but I think it's because they want to make sure that they do it the right way, not just the first way. But I would start with like commenting, starting having like engagement and dialogue with people. You may not have to post all the time. It really just depends on your goals. But I would say that you should always be aware and a part of the conversation. I saw one of my old high school basketball team members talking about marketing and advertising. And I did not know that she was a part of this space, but I started engaging with her in dialogue on how, budgets are adjusting and clients have to be more data driven approach with a solidified measurement strategy, and we just had a full-blown conversation. So I would start with, if you're not ready to do like scheduled posts or things like that, like you could always just join the conversation. But then also, if you see something really interesting in the advertising space, think of like you're reading eMarketer, Adweek, something like that, share that content and post your thoughts. I think that will also encourage dialogue. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are two great ways to go about getting started. I mean, literally just repurposing some other content, throwing your thoughts. It just shows that you're, you are, as much as you don't think you are a thought leader just by putting your thoughts out there and, sharing them with the world. So
100%. Yeah. There were some things in your early career that you would post like, oh, so and so did this and this. Do you think it's a good strategy? And I was like, shoot, I didn't even see it. They did what? Like you were a thought leader in that. You started the conversation and gained that, helped people like gain that awareness.
yeah, 100%. And, my philosophy on it too is like, why not make it fun? I'm going to post about stuff I like. Like I would do like UFC case studies and stuff. And like people
Right.
like you would notice it and be like, I had no clue this was going on, but it's pretty cool. So, I mean, lean into the things
Right.
you already find interesting. Like for you, Iman, I'm sure you could spit all the crazy video game facts that would definitely
Oh,
impress some
yeah.
video game C suites that probably, don't know half of what you know.
I'm such a diehard nerd. I love it. I love it.
Same, yeah, definitely. I come from a big video game background too. So to all the gamers out there, this is definitely a field where you can, nerd out and still have a lot of success and do awesome things. But yeah, that kind of wraps up the rapid fire value segment, Iman. And, thank you first off for just all the time you've given us. I have one more final question for you. And, I always ask this to everybody I interview just because I myself have gotten so many great insights from it. And I think it just really, puts on the table something that, somebody who's listening can just even start making a difference tonight when they listen to the episode of, moving forward in their career and just feeling like they have a better understanding of things. So if you could just for a second, just kind of step back and, picture a 20 to 22-year-old Iman. She's obviously very hungry, very motivated, very skilled. But it's just the fact of the matter that she's ignorant. She has no clue what's going to be the big breakthrough. She has no clue who's going to be the person that moves her ahead. I guess thinking back to that time, what is the number one thing that you wish you would have done differently, and how would that have changed things for you now?
I think that I would have taken, let me pause on that really quick so I can help ideate really.
So
It
many
is a
moments
big,
throughout your career.
yeah. I would say something that I could have done differently, honestly, is be more curious. I don't think I was. I think that I was like, I am going to create the next Final Fantasy, and nobody can tell me anything about that. Even though it was, the writing was on the wall that I just could not keep up with some of the other like stellar game designers that I was with. Um, and I think, yeah, just exploring, being more curious, because there was many moments where people said, you could go into advertising, you could go into marketing. And I had this small mindset thinking like, I don't want to sell vector knives. Sis, it's not all about, yeah, it's not door-to-door sales. Like, that's not it. So I think that if I could do it again, it's like, be curious instead of this absolute black and white mindset of like, no.
I think that's great because a lot of, highly motivated people who want to achieve big, like you literally said, I'm going to be the next great game designer, can get a little bit caught up and not be taking a moment to kind of smell the roses and, be curious and learn what's going on around them. So I'm so happy you brought that up. And that, in my opinion, is an awesome one to end on. I think there has been, like, if
Yeah.
you go back and break down this last hour and just synthesize it, you could probably get at least, 100 actionable insights where you could, walk away and start making changes. So I really hope you do. And I really just hope that everybody here is obviously as appreciative as Iman as I am. It takes a lot for these professionals to, set aside an hour and a half to just kind of talk about marketing. So super awesome to get to
Yeah.
do that. And just wanted to thank you again, Iman. It was awesome getting the
Oh,
opportunity
for
to interview
sure.
you.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and I know Eman Hubbard on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else people can find you or, what you're doing?
I think that is probably the best way to find me from like a marketing standpoint. If you are interested in like gaming advertising or something like that, you can follow my Instagram at the Jolly Juggernaut with like underscores. But yeah, just always reach out. I'm willing to connect on really anything advertising and gaming because they kind of go together, at least in my mind.
Oh yeah, they totally do. And yeah, I mean, to anybody listening, if you've made it through, the 56 minutes we've been talking here, there's your gift right there. Reach out to Iman. She wants to hear from you. Especially if you're an MSU student, I think she definitely, it's pretty much like a guaranteed response. So reach out
Yeah,
to her
it is.
and yeah, reach out to her and talk with her and, take advantage of these professionals who want to help people our age. There's a lot of them out there and it really just, is on you to make that conversation. So I really hope everyone does. And thank you again, Iman.
Of course, of course. Bye, y'all.